German pilots first saw the P-38 Lightning not as a threat but as an aviation curiosity, an aircraft so unusual in shape and structure that many wondered whether the Americans had finally gone mad. Two long booms stretching behind the engines, a central pod that looked like it belonged on a bomber, and twin Allison engines humming with a pitch the Luftwaffe had never heard before. They laughed. They pointed. They mocked. In Luftwaffe briefing rooms across France and the Low Countries, pilots sat around coffee-stained tables, smirking at photographs of the strange American aircraft. Intelligence officers described it as experimentally odd, mechanically excessive, and likely fragile. To the German mind, trained in the sleek lines of the Bf-109 and the rugged simplicity of the Fw-190, the Lightning seemed ridiculous. A twin-engine fighter? A split tail? A cockpit sitting between the engines like a bug clinging to a branch? Surely this was a sign of American over-engineering, a machine too complex for serious combat. But behind the laughter came something more subtle: curiosity. German engineers quietly passed around technical sketches they had intercepted. They saw the twin turbo superchargers, the extended range, the innovative cooling systems. Some murmured that the Americans might be hiding something behind this unconventional frame. Still, German fighter doctrine emphasized simplicity, maneuverability, and proven battlefield reliability. And in 1942, when the first P-38s approached European airspace, the Luftwaffe felt no fear. The first Lightning they saw flew alone near the coast. Two Bf-109s dove in, expecting easy prey. The P-38 didn't turn to fight. It simply accelerated, straight ahead, leaving the Germans stunned at its raw speed. Moments later, another pilot encountered one at higher altitude. He climbed to try to match it. He failed. "What is that thing?" he asked in his combat report. Yet still the joke circulated. Pilots chalked up every impressive performance to luck, altitude, or misperception. They still believed this weird American contraption, this odd, fork-tailed silhouette, could not possibly challenge their beloved Messerschmitts. What they didn't realize was that this same silhouette, the one they were laughing at, would soon haunt their skies. Because the P-38 wasn't designed to fit the mold. It was designed to break it. And the Germans were about to learn the difference. The first real engagements between P-38s and the Luftwaffe happened over the Mediterranean, where the skies were hot, clear, and brutally honest. Here, the laughter stopped. German pilots had heard rumors from Africa and Sicily. Rumors of a twin-boom fighter that climbed like a rocket. Rumors of a machine that dove so fast it left Messerschmitt shaking in turbulent wake. Rumors that Allied pilots were beginning to rely on it for long-range missions. At first, they dismissed all of it. Then came the encounters. One Luftwaffe pilot flying a Bf-109 spotted two P-38s escorting bombers over Tunisia. Confident, he dove from above. Before he could line up a shot, one of the Lightnings flipped into a high-G maneuver that shouldn't have been physically possible for a twin-engine aircraft. The German overshot. And the P-38's 8.50 caliber machine guns opened fire. He bailed out moments later. Reports from the Mediterranean quickly gained a new tone. German pilots began calling the P-38 der Gabelschwanz-Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. They never used that name as a joke. Lightning pilots, many of them young Americans who had never seen combat before, found themselves fighting veterans of the Spanish Civil War and the invasion of Poland. But the P-38 gave them an edge: speed, stability, firepower, and the ability to engage or disengage at will. German pilots described their frustration. "It climbs like a devil. It is fast at any altitude. It hits hard, too hard." More troubling was the P-38's frontal firepower. Unlike wing-mounted guns, all 8.50s were in the nose. There was no convergence range. No dispersion. Just a straight, concentrated storm of lead. German pilots learned this lesson the hard way. Several Bf-109s were shredded by those guns at ranges they believed were safe. The Lightning didn't need to get close, it simply aimed from far out and fired. Suddenly, That ridiculous twin-boom plane was rewriting the rules of Mediterranean air combat. The Luftwaffe had underestimated the Americans. And now they were paying for it in twisted metal and empty cockpits. The P-38 had arrived. And the Germans were learning to fear it. As the war intensified, the US Army Air Forces faced one massive problem: distance. Europe and the Mediterranean demanded fighters that could escort bombers deep into enemy territory. Most American fighters simply couldn't make the trip. But the P-38 could. It flew farther, higher, and faster than anything the Luftwaffe expected from a fighter. Equipped with drop tanks and its twin Allison engines, it could outrange every Allied and Axis fighter fielded during the early years of the war. This is what transformed the Lightning into a nightmare. German pilots were used to fighting bombers alone over distant targets. They planned interceptions assuming the escorts would run out of fuel long before they reached the Rhine or the Balkans. But suddenly, high above the bomber streams, glinting like silver arrows in the sun, were P-38s. Flying calmly. Flying confidently. Flying deep into German territory. Their presence shocked the Luftwaffe. How can they be here? Many pilots asked. The P-38's range was not just a technical advantage, it was a psychological one. Once German pilots realized they could no longer pick off bombers unopposed, their morale shifted. The Lightning began appearing over rail yards, supply convoys, airfields, and communication hubs once thought too far from Allied reach. A German ace wrote, "The P-38s escorted bombers farther than anything we had seen. They seemed to appear everywhere. And when the Lightning chose to strike, it hit hard. Those 8.50s fired with terrifying precision. One burst could peel open a Luftwaffe fighter like thin aluminum." In the vast skies above Europe and Africa, the P-38 became a hunter, the long-range killer the Americans desperately needed. For German pilots, it became something far worse. A ghost that could appear in any sky. A predator with endless patience. A machine that fought on its own terms. And it was only getting started. While the Luftwaffe struggled with the P-38 in Europe, a different legend was forming thousands of miles away, over the wide blue expanse of the Pacific. Here, the Lightning didn't just perform well. It dominated. The Pacific War was a battle of distances. Islands were separated by hundreds of miles of open ocean. Pilots needed aircraft with unmatched range, reliability, and lethality. The P-38 delivered all three. Japanese Zero pilots initially believed the Lightning was slow and clumsy. They were used to fighting nimble, ultralight aircraft that danced in tight turns. The P-38 didn't turn like a Zero, but it didn't need to. It climbed. It dove. It struck with overwhelming firepower. Japanese Aisaburo Sokai famously attacked a formation of P-38s, thinking they were bombers. He barely survived. The Lightning's firepower shredded his canopy. Bullet fragments blinded him in one eye, nearly killing him. After that incident, Japanese pilots developed strict orders. Do not engage P-38s alone. Meanwhile, the Lightning became the aircraft of choice for top American aces. Richard Bong, Tom Maguire, Charles McDonald. Each carved his legend into the sky from the cockpit of a P-38. The Pacific demanded endurance. The Lightning delivered it. The Pacific demanded raw power. The Lightning wielded it. The Pacific demanded a fighter that could hunt down enemy aircraft across miles of sea. The Lightning became that hunter. Its most dramatic moment was yet to come, but even before that mission, the P-38 had proven itself as the master of two skies, Europe and the Pacific. It wasn't a curiosity anymore. It was a symbol of American reach and lethality. And every pilot who heard the distinct howl of its engines, from Germany to Japan, felt the same cold truth. The fork-tailed devil owned the sky. The Luftwaffe had entered the war believing their aces were unmatched, men forged in the battles of France, Britain, and Russia. They had flown against Hurricanes, Spitfires, Yaks, and P-40s. They believed they had seen every kind of fighter the Allies could field. But the first time a German ace truly faced a P-38 alone, with no formation to hide behind and no cloud to vanish into, the illusion shattered. The duel did not begin with gunfire. It began with curiosity. Then confusion. Then fear. German pilots had been taught to exploit the weaknesses of twin-engine fighters, to dive beneath their blind spots or climb into their slow vertical arcs. This time, none of those principles worked. The P-38 climbed like a homesick angel, its turbo-superchargers pushing it upward with furious confidence. The German ace pulled back on his stick, expecting to leave the American behind. He was wrong. The Lightning surged upward as if pulled by invisible cables. The gap closed. The Luftwaffe pilot's breathing tightened inside his mask. The P-38's nose did not waver. Its twin Allison engine snarled. Its guns, for .50s and a 20mm, were centered perfectly. The German ace kicked his rudder, rolling into a split S, trying to shake the Lockheed machine. But the P-38 followed as if reading his mind. This was not an awkward twin-engine bomber hunter. This was not a lumbering interdictor. This was a knife fighter. The duel spun downward. Tracer round streaked past the German canopy. He slammed his control surfaces, desperate to escape. But the Lightning's concentrated centerline firepower meant one thing. If it had you in its sights, you were already dead. The ace rolled hard left. The P-38 matched him. He climbed. It climbed. He dove. It dove faster. At last, realizing he was moments from being shredded, the German ace broke the unwritten rule. He fled. He plunged into a cloud bank, banking wildly, praying the American pilot would lose visual. The P-38 followed him into the cloud, then suddenly, mercifully, did not emerge on the other side. The Luftwaffe ace leveled out, shaking from adrenaline. He lived that day. But his report would be repeated across the German front. This aircraft cannot be underestimated. It climbs faster than expected, dives with incredible stability, and its firepower is decisive. Avoid turning fights. Avoid vertical fights. Avoid being seen. The P-38 had stopped being a curiosity. It had become a predator. And the Luftwaffe understood, for the first time, that a new kind of duel had arrived in the skies of Europe. The most defining mission in the P-38's entire wartime legacy began with a coded intelligence intercept and a near-impossible challenge: fly farther, faster, and lower than ever before to take down Japan's most brilliant military strategist. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, was touring frontline positions. His itinerary had been decrypted. But he would be flying deep behind enemy lines. The Americans needed a machine with range no other fighter could match. They needed an aircraft that could dash low over ocean waters, unseen by radar, then climb suddenly into a perfect ambush arc. They needed the Lightning. The pilots chosen for the mission were handpicked, experienced, steady, unshakable. They knew the stakes. Hid Yamamoto's Betty bomber and the Pacific War itself might change course. Miss, and they would be dead men. Before sunrise, the P-38 sat in silence, dew clinging to their wings. Their tanks were topped with every drop of fuel they could carry: drop tanks, internal tanks, anything that would keep them aloft for the 1,000+ mile round trip. Engines roared. The twin booms vibrated. Propellers carved the early morning air. And then the squadron slipped into the sky, low enough that their shadows raced across the waves like ghosts. For hours, they skimmed the ocean at mast height, no higher than the treetops, silent, invisible, each pilot knowing that a single mistake meant detection by Japanese radar. The tension grew as the rendezvous time approached. Every minute had to be perfect. If they were even seconds early or late, Yamamoto would pass by unharmed. Then, almost impossibly, the Japanese formation appeared above the trees, 2 Betty bombers escorted by 0 fighters. The P-38s climbed sharply. The ambush was perfect. The escorting 0 scattered, caught off guard. One P-38 swung behind Yamamoto's bomber. Bullets tore into the fuselage. Engines burst into flame. For a heartbeat, the Japanese bomber lurched upward, wounded but still flying. Then it rolled, dipped, and plunged into the green jungle canopy below, vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Yamamoto was dead. The world would later debate the ethics, the necessity, the symbolism. But pilots understood one truth. Only the P-38 could have executed that mission. The Lightning's victory was not a matter of luck. It was the culmination of range, speed, firepower, and pilot skill, all converging into one of the most legendary intercepts in aviation history. To German pilots, the most terrifying part of encountering the P-38 was not its guns or its pilot skill. It was the moment the American machine began to climb. German fighters had long relied on altitude advantage. But the Lightning shattered those assumptions. High above the European front, Luftwaffe pilots watched in disbelief as the P-38 clawed its way skyward with a ferocity they did not expect from a twin-engine design. Its turbo-superchargers allowed it to breathe thin, freezing air at altitudes where other fighters gasped. When German pilots tried to climb away, the P-38 reeled them back in. When they tried to dive into clouds, the Lightning followed with terrifying stability. When they attempted to spiral climb, a maneuver that should have left the heavier American fighter behind, the twin-boom machine stayed locked on. It was as if gravity itself favored it. The P-38's power curve made the Luftwaffe rethink its tactics entirely. They began avoiding steep climbs in front of Lightnings. They issued new doctrine. Never allow the P-38 to gain altitude first. But gaining altitude was what it did best. German pilots described it in reports. It climbs like two fighters strapped together. It gains height too quickly. It should not perform this well at this altitude. And the more they studied it, the more they realized the truth. The Lightning was not awkward at all. It was a precision-engineered high-altitude predator. When the P-38 first arrived in Europe, the weather hit it harder than any German pilot could. Cold seeped into its controls. Moisture froze in the cockpit. Compressibility issues struck during high-speed dives. The Luftwaffe laughed again. They believed the Lightning was failing. But American pilots and engineers refused to let the machine die. They modified canopies, adjusted heating systems, refined tactics, studied engine performance in sub-zero air. Slowly, painfully, the Lightning adapted. And the Luftwaffe stopped laughing. Where German pilots once mocked, they now whispered warnings. Where commanders dismissed the Lightning, they now issued orders to avoid combat unless necessary. Where airfields once ignored it, they now prepared scramble alerts the moment its twin-boom silhouette appeared. Europe had tried to break the P-38. Instead, it sharpened it. And soon, the Lightning would prove itself not just a survivor in Europe, but a force the Luftwaffe could no longer ignore. The transformation of the P-38 Lightning from a troubled European newcomer into a lethal, refined predator was not an accident, it was a miracle born out of frustration, engineering brilliance, and sheer American stubbornness. The early months in Europe were rough. Engines froze. Compressibility killed pilots in high-speed dives. The cold seeped through the cockpit like a living enemy. But neither the U.S. Army Air Forces nor Lockheed engineers were ready to give up on a machine that had already proven its brilliance in other theaters. Engineers studied every combat report. Ground crews scribbled notes in grease-stained binders. Pilots debated solutions in frigid briefing huts with coffee steaming in their hands. The Lightning wasn't a lost cause. It was simply a weapon that needed tuning for a different kind of war. The first changes were mechanical. Improved cockpit heating. Better windshield defrost systems. Modified fuel mixtures tailored for the cold European air. Upgraded propeller settings. Turbo supercharger adjustments. Each fix seemed small. But together, they restored pilot confidence. Then came the aerodynamic breakthroughs. Pilots had long feared the compressibility coffin, the near-supersonic dives that caused the P-38 to lose elevator authority and plunge uncontrollably. Engineers responded with dive flaps, simple panels under the wings that acted like brakes. Suddenly the P-38 could dive hard, recover safely, and hunt with new ferocity. Pilots began fighting the way the aircraft demanded. Not turning. Not falling back into horizontal dogfights where Bf-109s excelled. Instead, using boom and zoom attacks with deadly precision. Dive. Fire a short burst. Climb back into the heavens. Repeat. German pilots soon realized the Lightning they fought in 1943 was not the same Lightning they faced in 1944. Maintenance crews became heroes. They could swap engines in freezing wind. Patch bullet holes with metal cut from scrap barrels. Rewire an entire aircraft overnight. One pilot wrote in his diary, "I bring her home shot to pieces." They hand her back looking brand new. The P-38's reliability soared. As modifications rolled in, the Lightning's kill ratio began climbing. Escorts lasted longer. Losses dropped. Bombers reached targets deeper inside Germany. And German pilots? They began reporting something new. A sense of unease. A feeling that the twin-boom devil had grown teeth sharper than ever before. By early 1944, the Pu-38 had earned what every war machine hopes for. Fear. Respect. A reputation. The aircraft that had struggled, frozen, stalled, and frightened its own pilots now dominated the skies through cold logic, mechanical evolution, and the unbreakable will of the men who refused to let it fail. German pilots once laughed at the P-38's shape. By 1944, they weren't laughing. They were scanning the sky nervously for the telltale twin booms. They were hearing stories of pilots who never made it home. They were learning that underestimating an enemy can be a fatal mistake. Fear spread slowly at first. Reports circulated of P-38s diving out of sun glare. Of tracer rounds flashing past cockpits. Of Bf-109s turning desperately only to be outclimbed by American power. No one wanted to admit it, but the Luftwaffe was losing control of the skies. German intelligence briefings included new warnings. Do not engage the P-38 alone. Avoid vertical engagements. Lightning units show increasing aggressiveness. The dismissive jokes faded. Pilots stopped calling it the American twin-tail joke. They started calling it something else. Der Gabelschwanz-Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. One squadron commander described the nightmare perfectly. You are flying. All is calm. Then suddenly a silver shape drops from above, firing before you even see it. It is gone in seconds, climbing like a demon. Fear eroded morale. Fear made pilots hesitate. In aerial combat, hesitation kills. Lightning pilots sensed the shift. They saw German formations break apart early. They noticed quicker retreats. They overheard radio chatter filled with anxiety. The Luftwaffe was cracking under relentless pressure from all sides, and the Pu-38 was one of the hammers driving the fractures deeper. The psychological impact grew. Airfields hit by strafing runs found wrecked aircraft smoldering in rows. Ground crews watched twin-engine E-shadows streak overhead. Smoke plumes marked another lightning attack. Every explosion felt like a message. We own the daylight. By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe understood the truth. They weren't fighting one aircraft. They were fighting an evolving platform backed by factories, logistics, training, and strategy. Every Lightning loss was replaced. Every Lightning pilot had a wingman. Every Lightning squadron grew stronger. And yet, for German pilots, the horror was personal. Every mission could be the last. Every contrail might belong to a Pu-38. Every glint of metal in sunlight could spell death. Nightmares followed them home. Some saw twin tails in their dreams. Others refused to talk about their encounters. Fear is a weapon. The Pu-38 wielded it well. Behind every feared aircraft stand the pilots who pushed it to the limits, the men whose instincts, courage, and skill turned aluminum and engines into airborne legend. The P-38 produced some of the most remarkable aces of World War II. Not by accident, but by pairing a unique machine with pilots who understood how to unleash it. Richard Bong, America's top ace with 40 kills. His signature attack: dive from above, fire short bursts, and disappear. He treated the P-38 like a scalpel, precise, deadly, efficient. Thomas Maguire, 38 kills. Bold, aggressive, analytical. He studied enemies. He dissected their tactics. He adjusted his style for every theater, every opponent. Maguire didn't fly the P-38. He merged with it. Then there was Charles MacDonald. 27 kills. Smooth, calm, graceful under pressure. He once said, "The Lightning does the hard work. I just hold on." Of course, it wasn't true. But it showed how seamless the partnership between man and machine could become. In Europe, aces were made under very different circumstances. Bitter cold. Endless bomber escorts. Experienced German opponents. Yet pilots like Robin Olds proved the P-38 could thrive even there. Olds didn't just fight. He commanded. He inspired. His squadron flew with a confidence that rippled through the entire 8th Air Force. Every ace had a different personality. Some were quiet. Some loud. Some superstitious. Some fearless. Some terrified before every mission, yet flew anyway. What united them was simple. Mastery. Of their aircraft. Of themselves. Of the sky. The P-38 rewarded discipline. Push it too hard and it could bite back. Treat it with respect and it became unstoppable. Aces learned its every quirk. Every vibration. Every sound. Every stall tendency. Every recovery angle. Their lives depended on it. These pilots shaped the legend of the Lightning. They wrote history in gun camera film. In contrails stretching across Pacific skies. In the smoking ruins of enemy aircraft. In mission reports filled with numbers that represented human lives. Their stories remain etched in memory not because they glorified war, but because they understood it, survived it, and rose above it. When the war ended and the skies finally fell silent, the P-38 Lightning did what all warriors eventually must: it transitioned from battlefield terror to historical icon. But its legacy didn't fade. It grew. And it continues to echo across aviation history even today. The P-38 was a bridge between eras. A twin-engine interceptor. A long-range escort. A ground attack monster. A reconnaissance marvel. An engineering experiment decades ahead of its time. It was bold. Unconventional. Difficult. Daring. And unforgettable. It served in climates that destroyed lesser aircraft. Blistering Pacific heat. Arctic European cold. Jungle humidity. Ocean salt. The Lightning absorbed it all. It was a machine that forced the world to respect American engineering. Its psychological legacy was equally powerful. The Luftwaffe stopped laughing. They stopped mocking the twin-boom shape. They stopped underestimating the Americans. The P-38 broke the German belief in invincibility. It shattered assumptions. It rewrote tactics. It humbled veterans. In the Pacific, it became a symbol of relentless pursuit. It escorted bombers across distances previously thought impossible. It intercepted aircraft no one believed could be reached. It delivered the mission that changed the Pacific War forever. The killing of Admiral Yamamoto. One mission. One squadron. One lightning-shaped dagger through the heart of Japan's command structure. Today, surviving P-38s sit in museums, polished, quiet, resting. But stand close and you can feel something. A presence. A tension in the air. A whisper of the engine's roar. A sense of what once was. History isn't dead metal. It's memory. The Lightning carries both. Pilots who flew it describe the same feeling. The power. The confidence. The fear. The responsibility. And the awe. They called it lightning for a reason. Fast. Bright. Impossible to ignore. Deadly when it strikes. Its legacy is not just mechanical. It's human. It's the story of young men who climbed into aluminum coffins and took to the sky knowing they might never return. It's the story of engineers who refused to let a brilliant idea fail. The story of ground crews who kept miracles flying. The story of an aircraft that became a myth. The fork-tailed devil earned its place in history. Not because it was perfect, but because it proved that something bold, strange, and underestimated can become a nightmare for anyone foolish enough to mock it.